There are so many reasons not to skip breakfast. So many savory, mouth-watering, tasty, delicious beyond all belief reasons. Actually, that last one was pretty convincing. Stop by for a McDonald's breakfast. Mix and match a sausage biscuit, sausage McMuffin, sausage burrito, or hash browns, any two for just $2. Price and participation may vary, cannot be combined with combo meal.
Have you been to Express lately? People can't get enough of their clothes. They're like instant confidence boosters. The jeans come in a temp control fabric that keeps you comfortable no matter the weather. And the t-shirts, hands down, they'll feel like they're made of the softest fabric you've ever worn. And get this, the suits have stretch and look sharp. Like, what? How do they do that? Everyone's raving about the newest looks from Express. Just check out the 5-star reviews. See for yourself and shop the latest at express.com and in stores.
It was so bad and so windy, and we had to crawl on our bellies to get away from the saddle and on the backside of the mountain. And my kids were really pretty scared, and we were scared. We didn't know what to do when we couldn't stay on the trail.
Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Today we are talking, we're throwing this one back a few years to talk to Cindy Ross, who thru-hiked the Continental Divide Trail with her family. And if you know anything about the Continental Divide Trail, it is not easy. It is the hardest, considered the hardest, or at least the most remote of the three Triple Crown trails, the Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, and of course the Continental Divide Trail. Very difficult. And maybe it'll inspire you to say, hey, I have kids now. Maybe these things are not off the table. But before we jump in, I do want to give a huge shout out to Rerouted, our show sponsor today. Rerouted is where you buy and sell used gear to keep it out of landfills, to get a deal, and to get something that's really unique. If you need gear, or if you're looking to sell some gear that you have, go to rerouted.co. That'll be a great platform for you to be able to get rid of it, get some, money in your pocket, help someone else go on an adventure, or find the gear that you need for your next adventure. Don't be, things are going up in price all the time. Shop used. Does so much good for the environment, does so much good for you. Definitely the best way to go. All right, let's get into it.
All right, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Adventure Sports Podcast. This is Travis. Since thru-hiking season is just about upon us, I wanted to find another thru-hiker to talk to you guys and explain and share their experiences. So I found Cindy Ross, and some of you may have heard of Cindy Ross. She's a longtime author, longtime and avid thru-hiker. She's got the She has a Triple Crown, which means she's completed all three of the Appalachian Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, and the Pacific Crest Trail. The neat thing about it is she's written books on each one of them. When she did the Appalachian Trail, she did it as a solo woman hiker, which is impressive in and of itself. And then she did the Pacific Crest Trail with her husband. And then the craziest thing is she decided with her husband to do the Continental Divide Trail with their two young children. And we're going to get into that a little bit because, one, it's near and dear to our hearts, the Continental Divide Trail. But it's also interesting because not a lot of people take children on this trail. And this is something I definitely want to hear a lot about. So, Cindy, thanks for joining me.
Sure, it's nice to be here. Thanks.
Good to have you. So let's get into your background a little bit before we get into the more current stuff. The Appalachian Trail. What spurred you to go tackle this one as a single woman?
I joined our local hiking club when I was 15. I had a boyfriend back then when I was young, and we didn't have a lot of money, of course. So we used to hike and walk, and even at night, in the evenings, that we had dates where we walked. And so I fell in love with that whole sport. And I joined our local hiking club. You didn't even need to know how to drive. And we were up on the Appalachian Trail in Pennsylvania. And I was 15 and I saw my first thru hiker. And he didn't have a lot of time to talk to us. He was on his way, of course, to Maine. And I just remember was just completely fascinated with what he was doing. And back then at 15, that's all it took was to plant that seed that someday that's what I wanted to do, was to hike that trail. And I didn't do it till I was 24, and I was in art school in Philadelphia, and decided to take some time off because I felt like I was dying a little bit, my spirit, living in a high rise in Rittenhouse Square in Philadelphia, and went off to hike the Appalachian Trail when I was 24, but broke my foot and had to end up doing it in two halves.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Back then I was a painter. My formal background is fine arts painting, and I've illustrated 4 of my 6 books. But my first book, A Woman's Journey, is all hand calligraphy with 125 drawings. So I was still thinking I was an artist only back then when I did that book and did that trail.
Now, did you do the AT going northbound or southbound?
Northbound.
Okay. So how was that? What were some of your experiences from the AT?
Well, I had a friend who he did the Myers-Briggs personality test for years with the thru hikers, because I belong and started the Appalachian Long Distance Hikers Association, and we have 600-800 members, something like that. And he used to test all of us to see what we were. And 99% of most thru hikers, long distance hikers, are introverts, and I wasn't, and I'm not. I am definitely an extrovert. So when my partner that I started with, when we broke up on the Appalachian Trail, I was very unhappy because I was in one of these, bubble gaps of hikers ahead and behind, and was not, that's not my place where I thrive, is being alone. So I hiked fast and ended up tripping and broke my foot from a stress fracture. So I learned a lot about myself on that trail, and I used to think I wanted to live in a log cabin up in the mountains like Thoreau, but I realized how important people were to me. I realized how important hiking, being in the mountains and walking was, but I also realized that I wasn't the normal thru hiker either.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. A study shows that, a lot of people would say, well, wouldn't you get lonely out there? And my thought, I'm more of an introvert than I am extrovert, and I would think, no, loneliness, that's great. Even there's no people around to bug me. This is perfect.
I can only handle one night.
That's funny. So you did the Pacific Crest Trail with your husband.
Well, only half of it.
Oh, you only did half of it?
Yeah, because he broke his foot out there. We weren't together. Yeah. Actually, we broke the same foot. Isn't that cute? But I was out there with a group of people that I just gathered together because I knew at that point I needed support and company. So he was ahead of me by a couple weeks, and it was one of the worst snow years on recorded history out in the high Sierra. And so he had to skip the whole Sierra because they couldn't ford the rivers. They were too high. And ended up going to Oregon, and then fell in a tree well with his crampon, hit a tree and busted his foot up. So he came home. I knew I wanted to hike the PCT in two halves because I knew at that point I also wanted to write another book. So then we got together halfway through the trail, and he healed from his broken foot. So the second half we did together, but we weren't together when we started.
Well, you people are either clumsy or you just make through hiking sound extremely dangerous.
Oh, no, you bust stuff up all the time.
That's funny. So how would you compare those two trails? We'll get into the CDT in a little bit. But between the Appalachian Trail on the East Coast and the Pacific Crest Trail on the West Coast, what are some pros and cons of those two trails?
Well, the Appalachian Trail is such a social trail. There's 225, Adirondack-style shelters along the way. So because it rains a lot, and and you're on a ridge often, so the water sources are often at the shelters. So it's a very social trail, and there's lots of road crossings, lots of towns, lots of hostels. So it's a people trail. If you want to be away from people, you have to hike it differently, southbound, section hike, not stay at the shelters, things like that. So that's completely different. And also, you don't have extensive views except for like down in the Smokies or up in the Whites in Maine. You're in the Great Green Tunnel. So, which is okay, because then that kind of hiking makes you internalize, and you think a lot, and you're pensive. But out west, it's fabulous views and expanses, and it's a different kind of mindset, because your head is up and you're looking, and it's just a broader kind of an experience and grander to me. It's difficult to do the PCT and then do the Appalachian Trail, or it's difficult to do the Continental Divide and then come and do the Appalachian Trail, because your bar of wilderness and experience adventure is much higher. So we always say that the AT is like high school, PCT is like college, and then the Continental Divide is like grad school.
That's a good analogy. I like that. And so basically, if you're an introvert, just hike the 18 south or north to south. So you have to pass by the people and meet them face to face instead of walk along with them.
They're doing a whole program of flip-flopping now, and they're trying to get people to start halfway and go up and then come back to spread out the people, because it's so packed down at the shelters now. Wow. Of course, there's a record year since A Walk in the Woods was filmed last year. So there's a lot of more people on the AT now. Yeah, I think Pacific Crest Trail is a fabulous trail. The Continental Divide is just one notch higher. When we were in Montana, the one year, we were out for a month and a half with our kids and our llamas, and we only saw one human being, and that was a cowboy riding the fences looking for breaks. I mean, we had to have our own group because there just wasn't the people out there, and that's the way that trail is. It's very wild. I mean, they don't have very many bridges across rivers. We did a lot of map and compass. I mean, it's better now than it was years ago, but it's definitely one notch up in wilderness. So it depends what you're looking for. When you go on these trails where there's more people, you have more support. You don't have to, everyone helps each other out. So, you can be a little bit more greener as far as, look at Cheryl Strait. She didn't know what she was doing. And if she was on the Continental Divide, she might have died instead, because there weren't any people around to help her figure out her stuff. So, it depends on your level of competence and how much you know about the sport as far as what trail you should do first.
So is it worth somebody getting on a plane and going to either the AT or the PCT for their first thru hike? Or, would you ward them off, warn them about doing the CDT as their first one? What is your opinion?
Absolutely. I would never tell someone to do the CDT first. It's just too big and too much, unless I think it's much better. Your success rate is going to be much higher if you have some experience, because there's so many more things to deal with out there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about the CDT then. You, as if you hadn't punished yourself enough with the PCT and the AT, you decided to take the whole family on the CDT, which must have been a wonderful experience. But I'm just thinking, that's a good long, 5-6 months every day.
We had to do it in 5 years, Travis.
That's right.
We could only do 500 miles a summer, because we could only hike in July and August, because that's when there wasn't any snow in the high country, except for New Mexico. You're pretty much in the mountains the whole trail. So we only had a window of 2 months. So we only got 500 miles done every summer. We started when the kids were 1 and 3. We had 100 cloth diapers with us. So for 5 years we went out, and our kids spent their formative years of their lives growing up in the Rockies and hiking and llama packing. So, we only did 500 miles this summer, which was enough for us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I forgot you had done it in segments, but still, even doing 500, with children along, because there's a lot of things that come up. There's children aren't exactly as open to doing these things as you are when they're little kids. I know what it's like trying to get my youngest daughter out on the trail. And
our kids, no, our kids were thrilled to death. We could have done it every year for the rest of their childhood, and they would have been happy. They never, ever, ever complained. And but they grew up there. We took Sierra out when she was 3.5 months old on our first week-long backpacking trip, and then we spent a month and a half in the Southwest desert when she was 9 months, backpacking all over the place. So now our kids grew up like that, so they were always happy. Even in bad weather, they were always happy because we always made sure that they were dry, warm, fed, and all that stuff. I think adults are bigger babies than the kids are.
That's probably true. Well, my son would go out there anytime I would want him to go out. But my daughter, she's not so much. She's more about dance and that kind of stuff. So, well, you guys took llamas. You used llamas to pack and to help with carry the kids. How did that work? I mean, did the kids, I assume they still did a decent amount of hiking as well, right?
Well, it was interesting because we have two different kinds of kids. And when my son was only like 3 that year, he was just very naughty. And he would get into camp and he would take the tent poles and poke them in the side of the llamas and try to throw rocks on. And, and he wasn't a naughty kid, but we couldn't understand what was going on. And here he just did not want to ride. He wanted to walk. And I go, son, we are doing 10 to 12 miles a day and you are 3 and 4, can you do a 2 mile an hour pace? And this child did. He hiked 2.5 miles and 2.5 miles an hour and was naughty again after that. And my daughter, she only got her butt off her llama when she had to. Like the hardest, steepest passes, we made them get off and walk. And then up top, of course, they always wanted to get off because they loved hiking up top and coming down over a pass. But my daughter and I went on to do some longer distance horseback riding then because she just loved to ride. Now she loves to hike now and did the Colorado Trail last year with her fiance when he proposed to her on Coney Summit at the high point of the Colorado Trail. But my son back then just wanted to walk and didn't matter how little he was. So I forgot how I got off. What was the question that you asked me?
Oh, just about how much they actually rode the llamas versus hiking.
Bryce rode as least as possible, only ready for drop over exhaustion would he get up there. And Sierra didn't get off unless we made her. So, it was wonderful for them to ride when they needed to, but at that age, you can't make kids do 10, 12 miles a day and over again and have them be happy. So the llamas are wonderful. Plus, we carried a lot of food. We had up to 16-day stretches that we didn't have to resupply because we had llamas. So that was very nice. And when we first started, Bryce was 1, we had 100 cloth diapers. There's no way we could have carried that. So we needed the llamas.
Yeah, I was going to ask how you managed that and how much you could carry, because most people will have drops, mail drops sent to stage along the way. So you guys were able to extend it. We still had mail drops.
Yeah, we had the Rocky Mountain Llama Association was our sponsors kind of and helped us. And so we would get to a road crossing and we didn't have satellite phones or anything, but my husband is such a good trail boss that we would be out for, a 10-day stretch and we would get to the road within 10 minutes of our designated time. And that could be sitting out storms or getting lost or whatever, but we were always there. And then people would bring us home and give us the car and because, do our diapers and go resupply. Because, when you're backpacking, you just stick your thumb out, but you don't do that with llamas and babies. So
right.
We needed help, but that's how we did that.
Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible.
There are so many reasons not to skip breakfast. So many savory, mouth-watering, tasty, delicious beyond all belief reasons. Actually, that last one was pretty convincing. Stop by for a McDonald's breakfast. Mix and match a sausage biscuit, sausage McMuffin, sausage burrito, or hash browns, any two for just $2. Price and participation may vary, cannot be combined with combo meal.
That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
Let's talk about some of the things you experienced. One of the things we like to hear about is just really, truly amazing times that just really cinched it for you.
A lot of them have to do with animal encounters. Encountering huge herds of elk that would thunder by. And because we had llamas, Travis, they're keen hearing and sight. They would see game way ahead of our ability to. So we got to see a lot of animals because of them. And, to see huge herds of elk and then come up 5 minutes later and see all their beds in the grass that were warm and round, and the kids would get off their llamas and lay in them and knew that this huge herd that just thundered by was all sleeping right there. Different times like that really impacted my children to care about wildlife and nature and things like that. And we were in a lot of storms. Colorado's famous for their thunder lightning storms, and when they were really little, our first year, we did the Colorado Trail first, we would have to put up our tent like 4 times in a day because the storms were so violent and the kids were so little, but you needed a safe place to be. And so, it taught my family, my kids, such amazing lessons about choice and what makes you happy and how little you need and the value of wild places and animals and not needing to be stimulated by technology and being out there for months at a time and thinking and wondering and dreaming and all those things that kids don't get a chance to do anymore because their lives are so full of schedules and technology and things like that. So I think those were our greatest gifts that impacted us the most, were just those day after day of just wondering, the wonder of being in a wild place together as a family was such an incredible gift.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what a great way to set your children up for life. I mean, that's the impact that it's, probably made on them. It's got to be crazy. They must take that with them in adults.
Honest to God, Travis, we homeschooled in the beginning, and then I put my kids in public school for 7 years because I got 2 book contracts in 1 year, and then they never wanted to be there. And finally, I let them quit, and they taught themselves the last 6 years and learned what they wanted to learn. But, my one friend who has a PhD in psychology and childhood development said that it was those 7-8 years of their life growing up in the wilderness and having all their senses stimulated and reaching this unbelievable level of creativity that turned them into the most amazing human beings that my husband and I never felt like we could take credit for because, literally they were just coming along for the ride at first.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, we want a backpack, and so we've got kids, and so you guys have to come along. But, what my kids are doing with their lives now and who they became, and I know, a lot of it did have to do with all the world travel that we did and allowing them to study and learn what they wanted to learn in their lives. But it all came and stemmed from our time on the Continental Divide Trail and raising them in the wilderness like that. It just created the most amazing human beings. This is, my new book that I'm writing about how I raised and educated them alternatively. I think if there's one thing I could ever tell any parent is you have no idea the kind of impact that spending time in nature with your children, what it's going to do for them. I was doing some studies and Daniel Pink wrote this book called A Brand New Mind, I think. And he was saying that, all these corporations all over the world are looking at students that have their Masters of Fine Arts, their Masters in Fine Arts as opposed to business masters, because it teaches them how to use their minds differently and to think creatively. It didn't matter what they were making or what they were doing. They wanted students who learned and looked at life creatively. And that's what happens when you spend time in nature. Those senses are stimulated. I mean, Richard Louv and his book Last Child in the Woods and Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder talks about, the level of creativity that happens when you spend time out in nature that impacts their whole entire lives, their occupation, how they think, everything. It's not just a little happy walk in the park. It turns them into different human beings.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. We older generations have grown up, being kicked out of the house, essentially go out, play, have fun. There was no such thing as tablets and things to sit there and stare at. But, we've kind of lost that. Like you said, you alluded to all the scheduling that goes on. Our kids' lives are scheduled completely, and they're, it's either that or they're entertained. I mean, I see cars going down the road all the time with a television on, and the kids are just staring at that television. I was made to play games. I played games looking out the window and long car rides, and kids aren't made to do that anymore. And that creativity is going, and I can understand why people would be looking for that for hiring people in the future.
Well, my kids grew up without a television. We never had one. So they didn't have that, and they never wanted one. So they learned to read and make things and put on plays and, things like that. But I mean, my daughter, she's in grad school here at Boulder, and she studies, she's a geography major. She studies water issues in the world, particularly in the Himalayas. And from traveling so much around the world, she realized that you can't separate indigenous people from their land, from the wild animals, from water, and that it's all connected, and to look at the whole issue to try to solve some of these major problems that the world is looking at now, which of course water is at the top of the list. So, she's seen how important and necessary it is to have a happy life. I mean, even oil doesn't matter to run your car if you can't drink water.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk about your books a little bit. Like I said earlier, I mean, you've written 6 books. You're working on another 2. 3 of those books are related to your thru hikes, the Continental Divide Trail, the AT, and the Pacific Crest Trail. So the books you're working on right now, tell us about those.
So I'm almost finished with a book called Modeling a Life. My literary agent has it out with some publishers now, and that is, it's kind of like a memoir, but it's inspirational to share how we lived and raised our children, hoping that parents realize the responsibility that they have, that it's not just the school system or whatever kind of school they go to, that they have to fill in the blanks and help these kids learn what they're not getting anymore. And if we can do this, it's just like I always said, I'm not telling you to take your kids across the Continental Divide for 3,100 miles. But if we can do this, you can go to the state park and you can take your kids out for an hour hike. And, it's small bites. And so you don't have to pull your kids out of school and homeschool them or take them around the world like we did. But just think about what else you can do to share with your kids to help them grow up to be happy adults who have selected occupations that are their livelihood and their happiness, and it isn't something that they have to wait till they're 63 before they can start to live. That I think that as parents we can give our kids so many more tools and so much more to work with to help them find a way to live happier and to be responsible for their own choices and happiness. And it doesn't matter. In America, that's one of the wonderful things, that you can rise up from wherever you are. There's a million programs to help you create the life that you want and the occupation that you want. And I think parents need to become inspired and take back the reins to contribute more to their children's education. So that's pretty much what the book is about. It's our lives and how we raised our kids, but it's just like all my other narratives. This is our story, but maybe there's something here that you will be able to use for your own family too. So that's one book. It's called Modeling a Life. I was a life drawing model for 25 years. And so each four sections of the book, four sections of raising my kids, it takes place on the modeling stand in a life drawing class. And so I'm kind of like exposed my feelings and my thoughts as a parent. And so I introduce each section of my kids' lives, like, okay, so now my kids are going to go into the public school, and I'm looking at the students out there at the college, and I ask them, so why do you have all these piercings and tattoos and tongue bars, and because I'm thinking about putting my kids in school, and I don't want the public school to ruin their creativity. And one girl says, oh well, I have a tongue bar because I like to play with it because I get bored, and that's what I do. And I'm sitting there as a mother thinking, oh my God, I want my kids to have a higher level of adventure in their lives than have to resort only to playing with a tongue bar.
Yeah,
and so,
no doubt.
and modeling is also a very effective way to teach by modeling your life. So it's kind of a metaphor. That's what the title is about. So that's my one book. And then my other book is about, I have a nonprofit now. It's called River House PA, and it's since my husband and I, we've been leading, our children and friends across wilderness trips, whether it's long distance cycling, paddling, and hiking. And we do a lot of long distance cycling. I know how to do it, and I know what kind of peace it can bring people. And so I've been working with vets for the last couple of years, teaching them and showing them that this place of nature and wild places helps you heal and get happier and brings you peace. So the book that I'm working on is called Warpath, Seeking Peace on America's Long Distance Trails, whether it's paddling along river or going on a long distance hike. So every chapter will have a different veteran and how they used a long trail in America to help them heal.
Oh, very cool. Well, those sound like a great book, so I'll look forward to them coming out for sure. Well, where can people go to find your books and find out more about you?
Well, Amazon has, I guess, an author page, and Barnes and Noble. So you can get all my books, even the ones that are out of print. You can still buy for like, I don't know, 5 cents sometimes, and $4 for postage. But A Woman's Journey on the Appalachian Trail has never been out of print in 34 years. So that book is available. And Journey on the Crest was brought back into print last year. And that's about 2,600-mile walk across from Mexico to Canada. And then Scraping Heaven was just brought back into print a couple weeks ago in softcover for the first time. And that's about our family's hike across the Continental Divide. So online, you can get them. If somebody wants an autographed copy, they can email me at cindyross4@verizon.net. That's CINDYROSS, and then the number 4@verizon.net, and we can figure out how to get them there.
Okay, good. Well, we'll definitely get the links in our show notes, so it makes it easy for people to find your books and to find your email and how to contact you, as well as your nonprofit. You had also mentioned pre-interview that you were coming back out to Colorado, to do some talks for the Continental Divide Trail Coalition. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, Teresa Martinez, the CEO of the Continental Divide Trail Coalition. The Continental Divide's having a big birthday, so I'm coming out, I think like May 21st, 22nd, 20th, something like that. And we're looking for opportunities to speak in the Golden, Boulder, Denver area. I have a multimedia little presentation about all 3 hikes and, what it's like to be a Triple Crown hiker, what it's like to have your family out there, what it's like to be a veteran. Like, I have so many things I can share about hiking and healing and happiness and everything like that. So the Continental Divide Trail Coalition will be posting on their website and information about where I'll be speaking that weekend. But my husband and I are also going to be doing the Great Divide Mountain Bike Trail this summer too. We decided that we should just ride the whole thing from Banff down to Mexico too. So we're going to go do that this summer.
Wow, that's going to be amazing. How long do you expect that to take on a mountain bike?
We could do it in one season, but I think we're going to bust it up. And because like when we had the kids, we got to the Colorado-New Mexico border, and the trail wasn't built through New Mexico when we did the trail, and the water sources were 40 miles apart. and we couldn't carry water like that for the llamas because we only did about 10 miles a day with the kids. So we switched out our llamas and got tandem mountain bikes and pulled trailers. It was like 16-foot long rigs, and we rode the Great Divide Mountain Bike Trail in New Mexico. So Todd and I are thinking that maybe when we get to the New Mexico Colorado border, since Teresa said so much of the CDT now has been built in New Mexico, we might decide to get llamas and backpack the last New Mexico 700 miles just so that we've packed it and rode the whole thing. Where when you start doing long trails like that, Travis, we're kind of traditional where we don't do a lot of we don't do any skipping, and there's so many hikers now that go on the roads and go around sections and hitchhike, but we don't do that at all. We just don't want to miss anything and feel like, all right, we want to go from the beginning to the end, and we want to see everything, and we want to experience everything, even the hard stuff. And so it means a lot to us to be able to have the whole trail finished. And we said, let's hike it and mountain bike the whole thing. So we're just from a different mindset that we don't want to skip trail. And everyone says, oh, hike your own hike, and that's cool for them, but we don't want to miss anything. And I don't know, that's kind of how my whole philosophy is in life. I don't want to miss anything.
Yeah, I hear you, no doubt. You may only get one shot at this thing. You might as well make it good.
Yeah.
Tell me a story about a time when things didn't go so well on one of these adventures. And it could be, you guys have been all around the world, Asia, Africa, South America, Europe, and of course, the United States. Is there a good story about a time when things didn't quite go right?
Well, my Continental Divide Trail book, Scraping Heaven, starts out with this windstorm that we had on the divide. And our kids were, I think they were 3 and 5 then. They were pretty little. And we were coming down on an open saddle, and I think it was in the Centennial, so I can't remember exactly where it was. And the closer we got to the saddle, the worse the wind was. And the wind was so bad that we had to take our kids off the llamas because they were scared, and we had to hold both their hands or they would blow their body away. But it blew their saddles off of the llamas so that they're cinched tight like a horse saddle, but it blew them off so that they were dangling underneath their bellies and making them freak out. And Sarah and I were flat on the ground, screaming for help because it blew us completely horizontal, and my husband couldn't even hear us. It was so bad and so windy, and we had to crawl on our bellies to get away from this saddle and on the backside of the mountain. And my kids were really pretty scared, and we were scared. We didn't know what to do when we couldn't stay on the trail, and the mountains were steep and everything. And we were raised Catholic, but we were having some issues with spirituality, and we felt God more out on the trail than we did in church and things like that. And so the kids said, let's say a prayer. And all of a sudden, this double rainbow came out as soon as they said a prayer that we would be safe. And we ended up figuring out how to crawl around the backside of this mountain. And, after that, my daughter, who was 5, she said, why are we going to church when every time we go, we had this priest that kind of preached hell and damnation and sin. And we had just gotten back from the trail that year after this windstorm incident. And Sierra said, why do we go to church when every time we go, we feel worse than when we went? And it's like, yeah, because she's thinking about how she felt safe and spiritual and close to some higher being out there when she was scared out of her mind. And so we decided to go to a Unitarian church, which was a little broad-minded for kind of fit our style after hiking the CDT. But that windstorm, completely changed how my kids felt about fear and getting in a situation where they felt like, they were alone and they needed some kind of, a higher spirit to help them through it. And like I said, we're not real religious people. I tend to feel like, being out in the wilderness and reading a lot of Native American, beliefs about the Great Spirit and stuff. And my daughter's husband is a Buddhist, and they spend a lot of time up in the Himalayas. And really, it doesn't matter to me what you believe in. It's just, try to believe in something that makes your life matter, and whether it's love or whatever you want to call it. And so I think that windstorm changed how we felt about organized religion, and where spirit really is. And I think it to us, it is out in the mountains in the wilderness. And so I think that was probably one of the most impacting moments of our whole experience on the trail for my children too.
Yeah, I'll bet. What a neat thing for them to experience and to give some thought about while they're hiking that trail.
Yeah. They're so smart, little kids are so smart. They just cut to the chase and say, "Why are we doing this?" It's like, I looked at my husband and said, "Yes, why are we doing this?"
Good question. We'll get back to you on that.
Honor here.
That's funny.
Listen to those babes. They know what they're talking about.
Right. So you have quite a bit of experience as an author. I wanted to dive in just a little bit about maybe some tips and tricks or advice for inspiring authors from somebody that's accomplished and has quite a bit of writing out there.
Well, it's interesting, Travis, because everybody can get a book published now, and everybody that does any kind of journey is like everyone wants to write a book, and everybody practically does write a book, which is fine, because it's a wonderful thing to have a book in your hand of what you wrote. But I think for anybody to read what you wrote, I mean, the reason I write is to be a communicator and to share with people my story and what impacts me, so that we can build bridges between people, and we can know that we're not alone with this kind of feeling and thought. Like, I have a blog that I write. It's called CindyRossTraveler.com. And, I write a lot about life and my family and my friends and experiences. And I write a lot of personal stuff, but I want people to know that they're not alone out there. And so I think to be a successful writer, and not just a writer, because, a writer is just one who writes. So, it isn't that hard to be a writer. But if you're really in love with sharing and communicating in the written word and expressing yourself, the more you read and the more you write, you're going to get better at it. And I'm happy when people read my stuff and read my blogs, but I write a blog for practice, because I want to make that bridge between myself and my stories and my life, and have people read it so that we can connect, because that's all there is, really, is connection and people connecting to each other. I mean, that's all relationships are, and that's what writers want to do. Doesn't matter if you're incredibly introverted, and you still, as a writer, your goal is to communicate and to share. And so if you want to be a good writer and you want people to read your stuff, then you have to write and you have to read and you'll get good at it. And my background is fine arts painting, and I had one writing class and got a C in college, and never really planned to be a writer, but I absolutely adore it. And I'm also still a painter, but yeah, anybody can write a book, but can you write a good book? And a good book is a book that someone's going to want to read, and changes and impacts their life and inspires them. And to me, that's the most wonderful thing in the world, is to be able to do that. And I feel incredible gratitude to have a lifestyle where I can be a writer and share and have people tell me that, especially with, being a parent and taking my kids out there, I feel like I have so much to offer, whether it's parents or veterans or whatever, that after all these years of being out there and experiencing these things, I know it works, and I want people to go out there and to use it as their sanctuary, and be able to come back in normal life and function, because they go out there and resurge themselves, and be able to get their spirit back.
Yeah, well said. Absolutely. Well, I'm hoping I left just enough time to squeak in a funny story from some of your world adventures.
Well, I was thinking about that, today when I was driving, and I have this crazy creative son who's actually he's an illustrator. He's going to illustrate my next book about modeling a life, but he designs craft beer labels, and he's always been in love with the creepy and everything like that. But when we were on the trail, he was really young. I guess he was 4 or something like that. And I was writing in my journal, and we were in camp, and I was stirring supper, and he's saying, "Oh, I'm bringing these bones out, Mom. I got my magic markers, and I'm going to make figures and faces. I'm going to put on a puppet show for everybody." And he's especially like the big pelvic girdle bone. It's a wide, expansive piece of bone so that you can put a lot of drawings on. So it's like, all right, son, whatever, and we're dragging out these bones, and he's drawing on them. But he's back in the woods, and he's complaining because he can't carry them on. I go, "Take one at a time." And he goes, "I can't. They're all stuck together." So it's like, what? So I went out and looked, and here, it's got like flesh on the bones. He didn't even give a crap. He just was so excited about putting on a puppet show and drawing on these bones. And it's like, wow, son, there's just no limit to your creativity out here on the trail.
If the bones are still stuck together, they're not done cooking. Leave them alone.
You on him, and it's like I realized when I look back now to who he was when he was a little boy. And he's got this fabulous website. It's called Bryce Gladfelter Illustration, and his BRYCE. He has my husband's last name, Gladfelter, and it's just fabulous artwork that he's doing. And I look back to him as a kid, and where it started back there on the trail, and it's just really cool to see your kids grow up and become who they're supposed to be, and to be able to look back and see, what you helped to do to help them figure it out. I always said to my kids, I expect, because some of my friends will say to me, like, "Aren't you proud of your kids?" It's like, yeah, I am proud of them, but I gave them this most amazing childhood, and I want them to make the world a better, more beautiful place, and that's their job. And it's not, it's not something that I don't want you to go through life and just coast and just try to make money, and that's all that you want to do. But you need to help make this world a better place and make it a more beautiful place. And it's neat to be able to see that happening. It's nice if parents can live long enough to see their children blossom, after years of believing that you were raising them the best way that you could. To me, it's out in nature.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have a heavy dose of that, regardless of who they become.
It's good to have a little validation that what you did was good and healthy for them, for sure.
Yeah.
Great. All right, Cindy. Well, I know you're in a little bit of a time crunch, so I'm going to save our goodbyes here. And I really do appreciate you coming on the show and sharing some of your experiences with us.
Thank you for having me, Travis. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. You take care.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Bye.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to the show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.
There are so many reasons not to skip breakfast. So many savory, mouth-watering, tasty, delicious beyond all belief reasons. Actually, that last one was pretty convincing. Stop by for a McDonald's breakfast. Mix and match a sausage biscuit, sausage McMuffin, sausage burrito, or hash browns, any two for just $2. Price and participation may vary, cannot be combined with combo meal.
Have you been to Express lately? People can't get enough of their clothes. They're like instant confidence boosters. The jeans come in a temp control fabric that keeps you comfortable no matter the weather. And the t-shirts, hands down, they'll feel like they're made of the softest fabric you've ever worn. And get this, the suits have stretch and look sharp. Like, what? How do they do that? Everyone's raving about the newest looks from Express. Just check out the 5-star reviews. See for yourself and shop the latest at express.com and in stores.